and always to you are King. Bless and let there be love in our home, the marriage experience ordained by you alone. Marriage experience. The marriage experience ordained by you alone.
Welcome to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos, where they explore what it means to cultivate a God-centric marriage by delivering realistic and biblical wisdom, pointers, and insights from couples and individuals on the marriage journey. Join them today as they share some insights. Enjoy.
Good evening, Marriage Experience family, and a very warm welcome to today's episode. We're genuinely glad that you're here and they're ready for a time of real couples having real conversations and living a real life.
Absolutely. We're so excited to have you with us. Whether you set a reminder to be here or just happened to land on this stream while scrolling through, please don't go anywhere. Stay with us. We don't believe in coincidences, and this just might be the exact encouragement your heart needed today.
And if this is your very first time joining the family, tonight is a lovely night to jump in. We're starting a conversation that feels a bit like a deep breath, something we often need to have during the week.
Absolutely. Around here, we see marriage as one of God's most incredible gifts, but we also know happily ever after isn't automatic. It's built intentionally, patiently, and with hearts that stay aligned with God's.
Absolutely. Our heart is to give you a foundation rooted in scripture, paired with practical tools that you can actually use. We keep it honest, we keep it real, and always leaving room for grace, because let's face it, all of us are still growing and learning exactly how to love better.
And we've spent a lot of time recently digging into the heavy lifting of relationships, those big, important topics. But tonight, we want to look at things through a slightly different lens.
That's right. As we always say, pull up your chair, settle in, open your heart, and let's start today's conversation. It just might shift the way you show up for your spouse and your family this week, because sometimes bringing life back into a marriage isn't all about heavy work. It's about the light work, the light work that's often overlooked.
So we've spent the past weeks talking about communication, understanding, slowing things down, and all of that matters deeply, right? But there's another side to a healthy marriage, and it's often much lighter than we think. So that's what we're going to be diving into right after the short break.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
So, as we said at the start, the other side to a healthy marriage is often much lighter than we think. No, that's because actually not every moment needs to be deep. Some of the strongest connections are built in moments that are actually quite simple, and I might dare say playful.
I think one of the things that can quietly happen in marriage is that things can start to feel a bit serious,
Too
right?
serious.
It's
I
too
would
serious,
say,
you know. And although not in a bad way necessarily, just a bit heavier than, or more serious than they need, that they used to be or they need to be. And sometimes you don't even notice when that shift happens. I think couples at times take themselves too seriously, and it's rarely in the big moments that things change. You know, it's like one day you decide, or rather, it's not like you decide to get everything so serious and okay, let's just remove the lightness from this relationship. It's not like that. It's usually much more gradual. Life, like they say, life happens, things fill up, life just fills up, and you get you face the responsibilities, the work, the family, the schedules that you have to run within the home, and sometimes just tiredness.
Just plain tiredness, yeah.
And none of those things are wrong. They're just part of life.
So, but what can happen along this? That some of the lighter moments begin to slip. The unplanned conversations, the small bits of humor, or the moments where you're not solving anything, you're just enjoying each other. And it's not that those things are intentionally removed. They just get replaced by practical conversations, like focus on, you're so focused, it's replaced by logistics, when you say, oh, have you done this, or have you done that, what time is this, or what time is that, or don't forget to do this. And over time, that can become the dominant tone.
Let me just say thank you for keeping, for spearheading, keeping things light, with us, because you're always bringing one thing or the other to laugh about. So I'm grateful
really?
For that. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So now, but when when that life in quotes happen, and things are just the run of the mill, the monotonous things that you do in life, then the relationship, it still functions, yes, but it can feel different, because everything is just maybe according to a schedule. You wake up, you have coffee, you do this, you do that.
Too focused.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It becomes way too focused, and it becomes like a business relationship and a bit less of a spousal relation. Yes. Yeah. And but one question that comes to mind is that have you ever had that moment where you think, we'll talk all the time, but we haven't really connected today, even though we're talking, but it's just on the surface. We're not really connecting, or where most of the conversation that you've had has been about what needs to happen, but not much about being together. And, I think what's important to think about or to say when those kind of things happen is that it isn't about doing something wrong, or this isn't about doing something wrong. It's just something that can and does happen if it's not noticed.
Yeah, so it's the natural drift of a full life, but lightness isn't just a nice extra to have. It actually plays a really important role. It keeps things feeling close, feeling accessible, and easy to step into. And without it, everything can start to feel a bit more effortful, if that's a word.
What's that?
So maybe the goal isn't to add something new, but notice what might have quietly faded. And that's a simple line in Proverbs 17:22. A cheerful heart, it's good medicine. A cheerful heart is good medicine. And I think that applies here more than we actually do realize. So the question becomes, how do we bring some of that lightness back into the relationship?
And I like that, you're addressing it as lightness,
because
life is full enough.
What is life is?
What is life is full of care.
You don't have the time to stand
and stare.
Yes.
Life is full enough that when you come home, that home now also becomes this place where it's as if you're treading on eggshells, and you really don't need that. Home should be sanctuary. Home should be peace.
Yeah.
Home should be a place where you can let your hair down, even if you don't have any anymore.
Thank you very much.
Home is where you can let your hair down and just be free, without having to perform for anybody. But that lightness is really what we want to what we really want to talk about.
Yes, what we want to talk about, what we want to bring back, and we want to do that without turning it into another thing to work on, not another KPI label task. This is what we have to do, because really it's not about just achieving, it's about living, and we've got to put lightness in it.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
And I think one of the most helpful things to realize at this point is that lightness in a marriage doesn't usually come from big planned moments. It's not always about setting aside time or doing something special, although those things have their place. But more often than not, it comes from the small, unplanned interactions that happen in the middle of everyday life.
Yeah.
And that's where people can miss it without realizing, because when you hear bring lightness back, it's easy to assume it requires effort.
Like everything, you tend to think, well, it's something I have to achieve, so I have to put in the effort.
Let's put it in the diary, So you don't need to organize some major life events or even change your routine. But actually, most of those lighter moments are already happening around you.
Yeah.
This is something our pastor says, that the solution is always there with you at every point in time. You only need to look at it, or rather, you need to recognize it,
yes,
and lay hold of it. So there's and these things are just so easy to pass by because they don't look significant.
Yes, they don't look significant because they do not fit in with what you have defined as a solution. So, you might look at a situation and go, well, this is the way it should work out. And when a different method comes in, you just don't see it because
you, for instance, there are times when you feel, we both feel like the atmosphere feels heavy or something. And there's a way you call my name, that will just diffuse that heaviness. And we'll both laugh and talk, or there's something you'll say that I'll give a comeback, and then that atmosphere just returns to that light, atmosphere that we need around us.
And that's what we're talking about. And thank you very much for that, because that kind of gives me, what's the word to use? It does encourage, and what we're talking about here is it might be just a passing comment, as you've said, or a quick observation, something mildly amusing as well, nothing particularly important in itself. But if you engage with it, even briefly, it becomes a shared moment rather than something that just passes through. And those are the moments that begin to shape the feel of the relationship over time. And what's interesting is how much of these moments build without you even noticing. You don't walk away from something small thinking that really strengthened our relationship. But when those moments happen consistently, when you have a bit of him up there and a bit of ease there, they then create, like a kind of mosaic, like kind of, underlying warmth that makes everything feel so lighter. Yeah.
Yes. And without them, things can start to feel quite functional. You're still talking, you're still coordinating life, still doing what needs to be done, but most of it, or most of the interaction that you're having, they just become about tasks, the things that you need to accomplish, things you need to do, rather than actually living within that relationship. And over time, that can make the relationship feel a bit flat, even if nothing is actually wrong. And I think that's that's such an important distinction, that nothing is wrong, but something is missing. And often what's missing isn't something big, it's just those small moments of shared enjoyment, the quick exchange that remind you that you're not just managing life together, you're actually relating to each other.
And living life together.
Absolutely. And the encouraging part also is that it isn't about adding pressure. It's not another thing to get right or something to measure. It's really just about paying a bit more attention to what's already there, noticing those moments and choosing to step into them rather than letting them just, go past you.
Yeah, because there are constant opportunities for that, what you're just talking about. Even something simple, one of you says something slightly playful or makes an offhand comment like you talked about, there's a small decision in that moment. There's actually growth in that moment. I can either move past it and carry on facing your task, or you can engage with it, even briefly, and let it become something shared. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take that much at all. It might just be a response or perhaps a smile, a short comment back, but it changes the dynamic. It turns something ordinary into something relational.
Yeah, I tend to be the more serious one, especially when I have a target or a particular task that, there have been times you actually take the laptop out of my hand and say, put it down, smile, relax, just breathe. And yeah, I really do appreciate those moments because I can get so tunnel visioned on what I'm doing that
task oriented
that life just sort of passes by, and until I finish that thing I'm doing, it's as if you know what, let every other thing just go and sit still. When I finish, then I'll resume life. But even in the doing of those tasks, we can still live, we can still breathe, we can still allow lightness without shutting each other out. Yeah.
And this lightness we've been talking about tonight is that it turns something ordinary into something relational. And over time,
absolutely,
that's what creates a sense of ease between both of you. It makes connection feel more natural, less effortful. I like that word.
And this word.
Yes, actually, I probably should
put it in the dictionary.
Less of effort. You're not just having to create space for it all the time. It's just happening within the rhythm of your day. It's part of it.
And that's really the beautiful part of it. It's just, I think for the past month or so, we've been talking about noticing each other. And it is just about that, noticing what is going on with my spouse, and how can I be there? How can I live for them and live love with them,
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
And I think the truth is that most people can actually recognize the difference, when this thing is happening, that missing light element is going on. And you can have 2 days that look almost identical on the surface, the same schedule, same responsibilities, but if one of those days includes even a couple of those lighter shared moments, it feels completely different.
True. True.
And it's the difference between just getting through the day together and actually enjoying each other within that day, and this is why this really matters, because those moments don't make things feel nicer in the moment. Rather, they create a foundation that supports everything else. So it's not just for the sake of the moment. It's something bigger. Less headache, less high blood pressure, less medical, situations to deal with, because Bible talks about laughter being good medicine. So when we incorporate that into our relationships, they make the conversations that we have easier. They reduce tension, like I've been saying, and then they keep the relationship feeling close rather than just functional or just existing together.
Functional is not closeness. Functionality,
You
yes, but
just
something
you're
can
just
work
you're just
perfectly.
doing what needs to be
Yes,
done.
yeah. And of course, the key thing is it's already available to you. You're not just you're not trying to create something from nothing. You're just becoming a bit more aware of the moments that are already there and choosing to step into them. And I think what's interesting from here is that not everyone expresses or engages with those moments in the same way. Yeah, that's true. What feels natural to one person might look quite different for the other, for instance.
I think this is also where it begins to get quite interesting, because even when we talk about lightness or enjoyment in a marriage, people don't all experience or express that in the same way, like you just said. And it can be easy to miss because we tend to recognize what feels natural to us and assume. That's what I was saying, that I can be the more serious person. So it's not often me who would initiate those things, but I go with the flow whenever you initiate them. So if you're someone who expresses joy openly through laughter, conversation, visible energy, you might expect that to be the norm. And if your spouse doesn't express it that way, it can raise questions internally, not always consciously, but you might start to wonder, are they enjoying this as much as I am? Or do they feel the same connection? When actually they might just be expressing it differently.
Exactly. And I think this is where that earlier question comes in. Can someone be quite reserved and still be enthusiastic?
This was last week.
Last week, yes.
We were asking that.
Can someone be excited but not show it?
Not show excitement.
And the answer
not
is
show excitement, but
be
very
exuberant,
vocal and exuberant about it.
And the answer is yes, but it just looks different. The engagement might be quieter, might be more steady, less outwardly expressive, but not any less real at all. And if you don't recognize that difference, it's easy to misread what's happening. You might interpret quietness as maybe disinterest or calmness as distance, when in reality it could be comfort, it could be contentment, or simply just a different way of engaging. That misreading can certainly affect how you respond, because if you feel like something is missing, even if it isn't missing, then you might start trying to compensate, asking more questions, seeking more assurances, and even pulling back slightly.
And that pressure can begin to build up and cause even resentment eventually.
Resentment.
It's like, what is this about?
True. And when that happens, then it changes the dynamic of the relationship, not because there was a real issue to begin with, but because the expression wasn't understood, the type of expression wasn't understood.
And I think it helps to separate two things here: what someone feels and how they show it. Those aren't always aligned in the way that we expect. Some people feel things quite deeply, but express them in a very measured way. And others are more outward, more animated. What they feel tends to come out of, it tends to come out quickly, whether that's through words, tone, or energy. Neither is right or wrong, but if you're different in that area, it requires a bit of awareness, right? Because you can unintentionally set a standard that the other person isn't naturally wired to meet. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and that can create pressure, even if it's not spoken. And the goal isn't to change someone's personality or or how they naturally express themselves, but to understand it well enough that you don't misinterpret it.
And of course, that understanding then creates a lot of ease, because instead of questioning whether something is here as there, or you begin to recognize how it shows up for that person. And once you see it, you realize it was there all along.
Yeah.
Just
that is often what we say to couples we work with, that it's not about gauging your spouse based on your own standards or who you are. It's about understanding them and dealing with them based on who they are. Meaning there's going to be give and take. Like we always say, there's going to be losing of ground. You have to move away from where you've
from your own set place.
Yes, you have to move from where you've held your ground towards your spouse. Each of you have to do that.
And what you just said just links us back to what we were saying earlier about small moments. Those moments might look quite different depending on the person. For one person, it might be laughter and conversation. And for the other, it might be presence or attentiveness, or just being consistently engaged in a quieter way. And both contribute to that sense of connection. They just do it differently. They're just different ways of expressing the same thing, really, at the end of the day.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
And I also think it's worth asking ourselves, what do we naturally notice and what do we overlook? Because we tend to notice expressions that match our own style, and we miss, the ones that don't. And it's such a good point that we sometimes we sometimes don't even know that it's happening. And it's that we're not tuned into that way of expressing it. And when the awareness grows, what it does is that it actually makes it easier to receive those small moments we talked about earlier. You start to see connection in places that you might have previously missed. And that reduces unnecessary tension within the marriage, because you're no longer trying to interpret everything through one lens. You're allowing space for difference, making without making assumptions, rather. It means, and you begin to close the distance that could have been forming because you are only just interpreting matters in one particular way, your way, whereas you are not noticing what's happening with your spouse.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes the whole idea of lightness more sustainable, because it's not based on one way of being. It's based on understanding each other well enough to recognize connection in its different forms. So if those moments are already happening now and we're learning to recognize them better, then of course the next question is probably this: how do we create space for more of these times without turning the this might sound very strange. How do we set KPIs without them being KPIs?
Yes.
How do we create lighter moments without it turning into pressure to create to create the lighter moments?
So I think this is where people can go one of two ways. Either they feel encouraged by it, or they start to think, okay, how do we make this happen more? And that's usually where pressure can creep in without them realizing it. Because the moment it feels like something you have to create or maintain, it stops feeling light, and which is the very thing that we're trying to bring back.
Yes.
So it's important, like you said, to recognize that, yes, we want to create it as a KPI, but not attend to it, not deal with it as a KPI.
Yes.
It's just in it's just been in the noticing of the opportunities that exist already within the day and seizing those opportunities.
And in trying to achieve that, I think it helps to say very clearly at the start that this isn't about manufacturing moments.
Precisely.
You can't really force likeness. You can't. The more you try to engineer it, the more unnatural it tends to feel, and the more likely it becomes a moment. That it's not a moment you'd like to remember, because you've turned the quest to be lighter to become something actually heavier. People can feel that way as well when something is a bit too structured or a bit too intentional. Even if the intention is good, it can become can come across as effort rather than ease. So maybe the shift isn't, like you asked the question, how do we create more of these moments? But it should be something like, how do we make space for them to happen? You notice the difference. One of them is creating the moment, and the other is facilitating growth. What's the word to use?
Noticing it,
yes,
and just seizing the opportunity.
Yes. And that often looks quite simple in practice. It's generic growth is what I wanted to say.
Okay.
It's less about adding something new and more about slightly adjusting how you move through what's already there in the first place. Remember, more is not always better. It's not, one of my pet peeves. Now I've got to say this, when I used to spend a lot of time in the training world, is when you get reports as he needs more training, and that, no. More doesn't mean better. The most important thing is to find out what needs to be done and allow it to grow rather than trying to ram more just to create a better result, and it hardly ever works that way.
In other words, what you're saying is it's for, or rather what we are trying to say is to be a bit more available in the moment, not always rushing past things, not always moving straight to the next task, just let's get to the point of the matter and then go on, but just allowing a bit of space for interaction, and that space doesn't have to be long, it might just be a few extra seconds where you choose to engage rather than move on. What I think is that this is really important because, like we said before, there is so much out there. We need to create let's not, you did say not to use that word create. We need to make
facilitate
room. We need to make room
yeah.
for those lighter moments because people can hear what we're saying and think that, I need to carve out more time for this. No, that's not what we're saying, because it's already happening within the same time that you have, and it's just a different way of being present in that time. It's just a way of, knowing that this is home. I can put down the heavy load and actually enjoy the moment whilst I'm here with my spouse, with my family.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
So it's primarily about how it is presented. That's what we've been saying. It could be something as ordinary as sitting in the same room for a few minutes without distraction, or finishing a conversation without immediately picking up a device or moving on to the next thing, or even just noticing when the other person is making a bid for connection, when they pass a comment or ask a question, something small, and then choosing to respond rather than letting it pass. And those moments are so easy to miss, especially when you're focused or when you're too focused or too preoccupied.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier on, yeah.
But when you do catch them, even occasionally, they begin to shift the feel of things. I also think it's helpful to remove comparison from this as well, because sometimes people hear conversations like this and think about what other couples are doing or what they might or what they might think that they should be doing. Yes.
Yeah, and that can take you away from what actually works for you as a couple, because what feels natural and light for one couple might feel completely different for another.
Yeah.
And it's okay for that to be, but the goal isn't to match a certain picture. It's to find what brings ease and connection within your own dynamic. And often that's much simpler than we think. It's not about big gestures or constant activity. It's about small, consistent moments of presence that, it just fits naturally into your life. I'm sure we're going to flog this tonight, that it will keep on ringing in your heads that, listen, all you need to do is pay attention to what already exists within your marriage. And so that when those moments are there, even in the smallest of ways, you tend to make everything else feel, or rather, those things will, tend to make everything else feel a little bit more manageable, because then you're being more present and noticing what can make both of you, your bond can make your bond stronger.
Yeah, and when they begin to feel more manageable, the conversations feel easier. Tension doesn't build as quickly, and there's a sense that you're still connected in the middle of everything else. So maybe the takeaway here isn't to try harder, but to ease up slightly. I often use the analogy of when I was younger, I stuttered or stammered, as some people might call it. And the way I was taught to deal with it was to try less, because for those who probably still stammer or who used to stammer, one of the things that you're taught is that, the harder you try, the worse it is. So whenever you feel yourself begin to just stop trying, and then it comes out. So you need to give yourself permission not to turn this into another thing to get right. But it's, you just want to stay a little more open to what's already happening. And when that lightness begins to return, when the words begin to come out, even in small ways, it doesn't just stay in those moments. It actually strengthens everything else around it.
I think what's easy to overlook is that those lighter moments we've been talking about, they don't just sit on the surface of a relationship. They actually shape quite a lot underneath. Even though they seem small, but they influence how everything else feels, especially when more serious moments come up. Because when there's already a sense of ease between both of you, conversations don't feel as serious to enter. That is now real hard conversations when you want to have it. You don't one's heart is not beating, you're not palpitating because you want to get into a conversation with your spouse. And but then you're able to communicate from a place of connection, because the relationship isn't being shaped by isolated moments. It's being shaped by an overall tone.
The big picture.
Yes. And if that tone includes lightness, then it brings a kind of balance to the story.
Very true.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
And I suppose that's why this matters more than it first appears to matter. It's not just about enjoying each other in the moment, although that's important. It's about what those moments are quite are building up, over time, and building up in a very quiet way, in a way that you might not easily notice. They build trust in a different way as well, not through big conversations, but through consistency. It's just knowing that connection is there, even in the simple ways. And that makes a big difference. Even when something needs to be worked through, it doesn't feel like you're stepping into something difficult straight away. There's already a level of warmth there. And that level of warmth then becomes fertile ground, for what we're talking about to grow.
Yeah, and that reduces how quickly things can accelerate because yeah, when there's a pattern of small positive interactions, it becomes harder for one moment to define the whole atmosphere, and things don't escalate and get out of hand. And I suppose that's also the reason that what we're talking about matters more than at the very beginning.
And you know what? I think that's quite a reassuring place to land, because it means small things really do matter. And they do matter more often than we give them credit for.
Absolutely. So, as we come to the end of today's conversation, it's probably worth just, gathering what we've been looking at. We started by noticing how over time life can become quite full, and how lightness can quietly drift without us intending it, and how that doesn't mean anything is wrong. It's just something that can happen when life gets busy. And when we then looked at how those small everyday moments, the ones that seem insignificant at the time, actually play a big role in shaping connection.
And how those moments don't need to be created from scratch. They're often already there, waiting to be noticed and waiting to be stepped into. We also looked about how people express that lightness differently, and how understanding those differences can remove unnecessary misinterpretation. And finally, how this isn't just about adding pressure or doing more, or putting in efforts to put in less effort, but it's about making a little more space, creating that little more space for what's already possible, and how those small shifts can begin to change the overall feel of how a relationship, often more than we expect, begin to change that overall feel of relationships.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
So let's have a word of prayer to wrap this episode up. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of marriage and for the simple everyday moments that often hold more value than we realize. Help us to notice those moments more clearly in the middle of busy days, full schedules, and many responsibilities. Lord, teach us not to overlook the opportunities to connect. Those small interactions, the shared smiles, the quiet ease of being together. Father, give us hearts that are present, not just physically, but emotionally. Help us to slow down where we need to, and to engage with one another in ways that bring warmth and life back into our relationships. Where things have become a little routine or heavy, Lord, restore a sense of lightness, not through pressure or effort, but through simple, genuine connection. And Lord, help us to appreciate one another, not just in big moments, but in the ordinary, everyday spaces where love is lived out. In Jesus' name.
Amen. 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 There's so much peace in just leaning into that grace, isn't there? We hope that prayer sits with you throughout the whole week and reminds you that you aren't doing this on your own.
So like we always say, keep talking, keep praying, and keep inviting God into the center of it all. And may you notice what's already there, because we need to add that to this week. Notice what is already there, and may your relationships be marked by ease, not pressure, because sometimes it's the simplest moments that keep you closest.
Right, so you've been listening to the Marriage Experience program on Heartsong Live Radio, Scotland's first Christian station on DAB Digital.
We're here live on Mondays with a replay on Wednesdays if you missed us.
And if today's a Monday, you're here listening on Monday night where you are, don't move. A Ride to the Loho is coming up at 11 p.m.
And on Wednesdays, we have What's on Your Plate with Annette. It's a great lifestyle show that celebrates everyday heroes in their communities.
And if Heartsong Live blesses you, consider supporting the station at heartsonglive.co.uk. www.ecc.uk/donate.
Also, please email us at mexperience, as we always say, experience without the E, at Lydio Santos, that's LYDIOSANTOS.com. That's mexperience at LydioSantos.com. You'll also find us on YouTube at our handle is at Marriage Experience, the same experience without the E. And hit like and subscribe. And please turn on the notification bell so that whenever we load a program or an episode, you will be the first to be notified. Also, download the HSL app for ease of keeping up to date with our programs or the programs on Heart Song Live, and also you can catch replays on there as well.
Well, that's it today on the Marriage Experience. See you next week. Stay encouraged, and remember, God is already there.
Do have a blessed week. Bye for now.
Join Ayakule and Bosade again next week on the Marriage Experience program as they bring God's truth to help you build your marriage God's way. Till then, remember, marriage is God's idea and it is a good thing.
The marriage experience all day.